Looking back now, it feels almost surreal how blind I was to the warning signs. I guess when you care about someone deeply, or when you've invested so much of your time, energy, and emotions into them, you naturally give them the benefit of the doubt. You convince yourself that this is just what love is supposed to feel like. You make excuses. You settle. I suppose I did all of that with him. I'm 25 years old, and for the past 2 years, I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend. He's 27, owns a small restaurant in the city, and lives right above it in this little apartment that was both cozy and chaotic, kind of like him. When I first met him, there was something charming about the way he carried himself. He had that small business owner confidence, like someone who built his own little world and didn't need to answer to anyone. I admired that. Maybe because I wanted some of that freedom and control for myself. I won't lie, the first few months with him felt like a dream. Late nights after his restaurant closed, we'd sit upstairs in his apartment drinking wine, laughing about random things, sharing stories about our past. He told me about his struggles building the restaurant from scratch. I told him about my dreams, my fears, my family. We were comfortable. Or so I thought. I have a history, a bad one, honestly, of falling for the wrong kind of men. The ones who look like they have their life together, but underneath it all, are just as messy and broken as anyone else. I don't know if it's a flaw in my judgment or if I just hold on to hope for too long. Maybe both. But I believed he was different. He wasn't the flashy, player type. He wasn't someone who would shower me with gifts or sweet words. He was practical, grounded, or that's what I told myself. Still, there were moments that felt off. Small moments. The way he would get impatient when I asked him about his day. The way he didn't really involve me in his restaurant life, even though I was always around. The way he seemed perfectly content keeping parts of his world separate from me. I told myself it was because he was busy, stressed. After all, owning a restaurant isn't easy. He worked long hours. He had responsibilities. And I was understanding. Maybe a little too understanding. What I didn't realize at the time was how slowly I had started to lose pieces of myself in the process. It started with small things, running errands for him because he was too busy, doing his laundry because he had no time. Then it turned into handling his grocery shopping, managing things around his apartment, even organizing his schedule at times. I wanted to be helpful, I thought that's what partners did. But in hindsight, it became clear that I was slipping into the role of his personal assistant rather than his girlfriend. I also need to admit something I was ashamed of for a long time. I was financially dependent on him for a while. After I lost my job due to an accident, things became really hard for me. He offered to help, and I accepted. At first, it was comforting. I thought it meant he cared. But over time, it felt like my independence was slowly slipping away. I didn't have the means to leave even if I wanted to. The worst part is, despite these red flags, I never thought he would betray me in the ultimate way. I never thought he would cheat. I believed in loyalty, in sticking it out through hard times. I believed we could work through things if we communicated enough, if I was patient enough, if I loved him enough. But love, real love, isn't supposed to make you feel like you're walking on eggshells. It isn't supposed to make you feel invisible or unimportant. And yet, that's exactly how I felt most days without even realizing it. I guess that's the hardest pill to swallow, not that he lied, not that he betrayed me, but that I let it happen for so long. I stayed because I thought things would get better. I stayed because I didn't want to start over again. I stayed because I convinced myself that love was supposed to be hard. But love isn't supposed to break you. Things really started to unravel a few days ago, the day he told me about his trip. It wasn't like he sat me down and explained it properly. No, it happened casually, like an afterthought. We were in his apartment, I was folding his laundry, of course, and he just mentioned that he was going on a trip with some of his buddies. Apparently, one of his college friends had just gotten engaged, and this trip was their way of celebrating. A guy's trip, that was the term he used. Now, I'm not the controlling type. I'm not someone who's going to flip out because my boyfriend wants to go on vacation with his friends. I understand people need space, I need it too. But something about the way he told me didn't sit right. It was rushed. Dismissive. Like he was trying to tell me just enough to avoid suspicion but not enough to actually have a conversation about it. Naturally, I asked where he was going, what the plan was, not because I didn't trust him, but because I was genuinely curious. I wanted to be part of his excitement. Isn't that normal in a relationship? But the answers I got felt like little pebbles in my stomach, slowly weighing me down. He mentioned Ibiza. Ibiza. A place known for wild parties, nightlife, and things that honestly didn't fit his personality, or at least the personality he showed me. And when I asked who exactly was going, he dropped a few names I had never heard before. Supposedly friends from college, but I found it odd that in 2 years of being together, I had never met or even heard stories about these so-called close friends. Then he changed the subject entirely. Just like that. No details, no shared excitement, no inside jokes about the trip. Nothing. His whole attitude screamed avoidance. And that's when the gut feeling hit me, like a heavy knot twisting in my stomach. I wish I could say I'm someone who trusts her instincts right away, but I'm not. I've ignored my gut more times than I can count because I didn't want to seem crazy or paranoid. But this time? This time it felt different. The moment he walked out the door for his trip, bag in hand, barely even kissing me goodbye, I just stood there, staring at the closed door for what felt like an eternity. My heart wasn't racing, it was sinking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. And when I'm anxious, when I feel like the walls are closing in, there's only one person I trust enough to talk to, his mom. It sounds strange, doesn't it? To be closer to your boyfriend's mom than to him. But she and I had always gotten along well. She saw how much I did for her son. She would call me her second daughter sometimes, and honestly, those little moments of warmth were what kept me sane when things felt cold between him and me. So I called her. When she picked up, her voice was cheerful, until I told her I was feeling down, feeling off. I didn't even have to mention the trip. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just told her I felt sad and had this sinking feeling. And that's when she exploded. I could hear the anger and frustration in her voice, layered with disappointment. She didn't even try to hide it. She started going on about how she couldn't believe he would do this to me. That she had tried to stop him. That she told him he was making a huge mistake. The more she spoke, the more it became painfully obvious, this wasn't a guy's trip at all. I didn't even need her to say it outright, though she practically did. The implication was crystal clear. He wasn't in Ibiza with some college friends celebrating an engagement. He was there with another woman. And based on how she was talking, the bitterness in her voice, I had a gut feeling about who it might be. His ex. The woman I had asked him about once before, the one he swore was out of his life. At that moment, I felt two things at once, devastation and clarity. I knew. I just knew. And everything inside me shifted. When I hung up that phone after talking to his mom, I swear my whole body went numb. It was like every sound around me disappeared, and I could only hear the pounding of my own heart. You know when people say you can feel your heart breaking? It's true. It doesn't happen all at once, it happens piece by piece. The realization comes in waves, first confusion, then anger, then that unbearable sadness that makes your chest feel hollow. I sat there for a moment, staring blankly at the wall of his apartment. The apartment I had cleaned countless times. The place I had cooked meals in, folded his laundry, watered his stupid plants. The space that felt less like home and more like a shrine to all the effort I had poured into this relationship while he was lying straight to my face. It was like every little memory in that room turned sour in an instant. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I hate admitting that. But deep down, a part of me always knew he wasn't the man I kept trying to convince myself he was. This wasn't just about the trip or the cheating, this was about every little thing that led up to this moment. The time he made me feel small in front of his friends. The day I told him I was pregnant, and instead of supporting me, he threw money in my face like I was some kind of problem to get rid of, in front of the entire restaurant staff, no less. I can still feel the humiliation burning my skin from that memory. And still, I stayed. Why? Because love makes fools of us all. Because I had no job, no savings, and nowhere else to go after losing mine in that stupid accident. Because I believed people could change. Because I thought maybe if I was patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, he would wake up one day and realize how lucky he was to have me. But this? This was the final straw. Without thinking, I stood up. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I grabbed my keys, the spare key he gave me back when things were good, back when I believed this was a real partnership, and I walked out. I didn't even grab a jacket. The cold air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside, but I didn't care. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel as I drove to his apartment above the restaurant, the one I had spent so many nights in, cooking for him, waiting for him, believing in him. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was done. Done being the good girlfriend. Done being the fool. I walked up those stairs like I had 100 times before. The door opened easily, that stupid little spare key slid right in like it was meant to. And then I stood there. In that apartment. Looking at all his things. His expensive shirts I had washed and folded. His bed sheets I had curled up in when he held me, probably telling me he loved me with the same mouth he used to lie. And I snapped. I didn't plan what I did next. There was no strategy. No logical thought process. It was pure, unfiltered rage. I grabbed his bed sheets first, tearing them apart with the scissors I found in his drawer. I cut through them like I was cutting through every lie he had told me. His expensive shirts? The ones he cared about more than my feelings? I shredded them, one after another. And then I opened the fridge. I pulled out everything, sauces, drinks, leftovers, eggs, and I didn't just throw them away. I painted the walls with them. I covered the floor. The ceiling. The fridge contents became my weapon, my protest, my final goodbye. Every splash, every stain, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Not my proudest moment, I know that. But sometimes heartbreak doesn't come out in tears. Sometimes it comes out in chaos. When I was done, when there was nothing left to destroy that wouldn't get me arrested, I stood in the middle of the wreckage and took a deep breath. And for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Walking out of that apartment was surreal. I shut the door behind me quietly, almost too quietly for someone who had just unleashed absolute hell inside. There was this eerie calmness in me as I walked down the stairs. Like all that anger had burned through me and left me feeling empty. It wasn't relief. It wasn't regret either, not yet. It was just this strange, hollow silence inside my chest. But the second I got in my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel, reality started creeping back in. What did I just do? That thought kept repeating in my mind on a loop. Over and over again. I stared at my hands, sticky from the mess I'd made. There was even a little streak of some kind of sauce or juice dried onto my arm. I looked like someone straight out of a bad breakup movie, the kind where the girl totally loses it and everyone laughs, but this wasn't funny. This was my real life. And for a brief moment, I felt guilty. Not because I didn't think he deserved it, no, he absolutely did. But because I wasn't the type of person to do things like this. Or at least, I didn't think I was. Was I becoming someone I didn't recognize? Someone spiteful? Vengeful? I sat there in my car for what felt like forever, just thinking. The memories kept flashing through my mind, him packing for his boys' trip, avoiding eye contact, brushing off my questions, acting like I was silly for even asking. And now I knew why. It wasn't a boys' trip. It was a getaway with another woman. Likely his ex. That was what really stung. I had spent so long convincing myself to trust him again after everything we'd been through. After the pregnancy. After him humiliating me with that wad of cash thrown in my face like I was an inconvenience. And yet, there I was, still trying to fix things. Still cleaning up after him. Still believing I could somehow turn this train wreck into something stable. But that phone call with his mother? That was the final nail in the coffin. She didn't even hesitate when I told her I was feeling down. It was like she was just waiting for someone to validate her own disappointment in him. She knew what he was doing. She tried to stop him. She was angry for me, heartbroken even. That told me everything I needed to know. So sitting in that car, guilt mixing with fury, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit there and cry. I wasn't going to wallow. But I also wasn't going to let it end like this, not with me feeling like I had become the villain in my own story. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove back to my place. I needed to clean up, both literally and emotionally. When I got home, I jumped straight into the shower. The water ran over me like a reset button. I scrubbed myself until my skin turned pink, washing away every trace of the mess I'd made, not just the sauce or the grime, but the version of me that had let this man control my happiness for so long. After the shower, wrapped in a towel, I sat on my bed and messaged a mutual friend, someone who worked at the restaurant and had always been kind to me. I told him what happened. I told him I felt guilty for trashing the place, even though I didn't regret standing up for myself. He agreed to meet me at the restaurant in the morning before his shift to check out the damage, to see if anything could be fixed or cleaned up before my boyfriend returned. Was I nervous? Absolutely. But I also knew this was me trying to reclaim a little bit of my dignity. I didn't want to leave things on a note of pure destruction. If I could clean up even a little bit, if I could leave the key behind and walk away knowing I had the final say, then maybe I could live with myself a little easier. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure. It was about finally being done. The next morning felt heavier than usual. I barely slept the night before, my mind wouldn't shut off. Thoughts kept racing. Did I go too far? Was he going to call the police? Would this come back to bite me? Or, would I just become another crazy ex-girlfriend story he told people at the bar? But underneath all that anxiety was a weird sense of peace too. I was done. Really done. No more second-guessing. No more excuses. No more waiting for him to change. Still, I felt like I owed it to myself, not to him, to at least try to clean up some of the chaos I left behind. Not because I regretted what I did, but because I didn't want to carry around the weight of feeling like I lost control. I wanted this chapter closed with me in charge of the ending. So I texted his friend, let's call him Dan. Dan had always been neutral. Not one of those friends who hyped my boyfriend's bad behavior or brushed me off. If anything, he always looked at me like he pitied me, like he knew I deserved better. He agreed to meet me at the restaurant before his shift started. The drive there was nerve-wracking. My heart thudded in my chest as I parked out front. The restaurant was still quiet, too early for customers, but that familiar ache hit me when I realized how many times I'd been here before. Waiting for him. Supporting him. Loving him while being invisible to him. Dan showed up a few minutes later, looking a little groggy, probably assuming I was being dramatic. Morning, he greeted me with a yawn. You okay? I nodded, keeping my hands in my jacket pockets. Yeah, but, I need you to see something. Without saying much more, I followed him up the side stairs to the apartment above the restaurant. My heart pounded harder with every step. I knew what I left behind, the ripped-up bedsheets, the stained walls from whatever I found in the fridge, the cut-up shirts hanging like sad little flags of war. It was chaos. Dan unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. Dead stop. The moment he flicked the light on, I swear the blood drained from his face. Silence. His eyes slowly scanned the room, the floors still sticky in some spots, the fridge door slightly ajar from where I'd been digging through it, the ceiling marked with splashes of sauce or whatever else I'd thrown. He didn't speak. Didn't even breathe for a second. I stood there awkwardly behind him, feeling like a kid caught doing something very, very bad, but without the shame. More like waiting for the shock to settle. Finally, he turned to me, his expression somewhere between disbelief and total awe. You did all this? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. I gave him a small, tired nod. Yeah. Just me. Another pause. He ran a hand through his hair, still staring around like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Holy shit, he muttered. I mean, damn. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I thought you were exaggerating, he added after another moment of silence. But this is next level. There wasn't anger in his voice though. No judgment. It was more like, respect? Fear? Maybe both. I came to see if we could clean some of it up before he gets back, I explained quietly. I don't want to leave it completely wrecked. Dan shook his head slowly, exhaling hard. Honestly? I don't think there's much we can do here. This looks like a hurricane tore through. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Another part wanted to curl into a ball and cry. But mostly? I just felt empty again. Dan didn't say much after that. He started to walk out, still shaking his head, probably needing to process what he'd just witnessed. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, he turned back to me. For what it's worth, he said, he had this coming. I met his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Whatever came next. I was done being the fool. After Dan left, I stayed in the apartment for a while, alone. It was strangely quiet, almost peaceful despite the wreckage I had caused. I stood in the middle of the room and looked around, not as the angry, betrayed girlfriend who had torn the place apart, but as a woman who was finally starting to see everything clearly. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't distracted by love, or guilt, or hope that maybe things would get better. No. Now I was just staring at reality. This wasn't a home. It was a storage space for his convenience. A place I had cleaned, decorated, stocked with groceries, folded laundry in, cooked in, and yet none of it ever really belonged to me. I was just a guest in the life of a man who never truly valued me. And the worst part? I had willingly given everything I had, my time, my energy, my body, in the foolish hope that he would see me as his partner. But I wasn't his partner. I was his replacement mother. His unpaid maid. His emotional punching bag when things didn't go his way. And all of it came crashing down in this moment. I thought about all the little things I had done for him. The things that had become so normal I didn't even notice them anymore. Restocking his favorite snacks without him asking. Washing his work uniforms late at night because he forgot to do it himself. Cleaning up after his drunk friends when they came over uninvited. Picking up prescriptions when he was too busy. And for what? For a man who lied to my face, who packed his bags and left for a trip with another woman, without a single ounce of respect for me. It hit me then how much I had shrunk myself to fit into his world. I stopped hanging out with friends because he made me feel guilty for leaving him alone. I stopped dressing how I liked because he would make little jokes about it. I stopped dreaming about things for myself because everything became about his restaurant, his career, his needs. I had lost myself in him. And he didn't even notice. That realization stung more than anything else. I sat down on the edge of the destroyed bed, torn sheets hanging off like wounded skin, and just breathed. There was no sadness left in me. No anger either. Just this deep, hollow acceptance that I had wasted 2 years of my life trying to be enough for someone who would never love me the way I deserved. But you know what? That was over now. I wasn't going to clean this place up for him. Why should I? This mess wasn't just about spilled sauce and shredded fabric, this was a physical manifestation of everything I had held inside for far too long. My exhaustion. My heartbreak. My worth. This was my final goodbye. I pulled out my phone and started blocking him on everything. His number. His social media accounts. Even his friends who I knew would try to reach out on his behalf. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I didn't want to hear his lies. He made his choices. And now I was making mine. Before I left, I walked through the apartment one last time. I looked at the ruined walls, the slashed clothes, the empty fridge, and I felt something strange, pride. Not because I had caused damage, but because I had finally chosen myself. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was a woman who had been betrayed, disrespected, humiliated, and who finally said, enough. I left the key on the kitchen counter. No note. No explanation. He didn't deserve my words anymore. As I locked the door behind me and walked down those stairs, I didn't feel like a broken woman. I felt free. For the first time in years. And when I stepped outside and felt the sunlight on my face, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. Walking out of that apartment felt like walking out of a nightmare. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, sealing in everything I was leaving behind, the memories, the heartbreak, the humiliation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had spent 2 years looking back, holding on to pieces of something that was never real. Not anymore. I sat in my car for a long while, just staring out at the street. My hands were still shaking a little, not from fear or regret, but from the adrenaline still coursing through me. Everything felt surreal. Like I had just walked out of a bad movie where I'd played the role of a naive girlfriend, only to wake up and realize I was so much more than that. For a moment, I wondered what he would say when he walked back into that disaster of an apartment. Would he explode in anger? Would he call me crazy? Would he try to guilt-trip me like he always did? It didn't matter. He wasn't my problem anymore. But still, there was a strange ache in my chest. Not because I missed him, God, no. But because I missed me. I missed the version of me that existed before I met him. The girl who laughed freely, who dreamed big, who didn't second-guess her every move. I missed the girl who believed in love. And maybe, someday, I'd find her again. But first, I had to let go, fully, completely, and without apology. I drove straight to my best friend's place. She was the one person who had seen me through the worst of this relationship. The sleepless nights. The anxiety attacks. The endless, maybe he'll change conversations. When I showed up at her door, she didn't say anything. She just hugged me like she knew everything I was feeling. I told her the whole story, every messy, painful detail. From the vague Ibiza trip to the call with his mother, to the revenge I unleashed on his apartment. And when I finished, I expected her to judge me, to tell me I had gone too far. But instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You were pushed to your breaking point. And I'm proud of you for walking away." That broke me in a different way. For so long, I thought I was crazy for feeling the things I felt. He had made me believe I was overreacting, too sensitive, too emotional. But hearing those words from someone who genuinely cared about me? It was healing in a way I didn't know I needed. We spent hours talking, about everything and nothing. And for the first time in forever, I felt safe. No lies. No manipulation. Just honesty and love. I stayed the night at her place, curled up on her couch with a blanket and a cup of tea. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some grand movie scene. But it was real. And right now, real was all I wanted. The next morning, I woke up to a few missed calls from Dan's number. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't care what he had to say. His words didn't hold power over me anymore. I blocked the last of his contacts, just to be sure, and sent a quick message to Dan's mother. I didn't want to be cruel, but I needed her to know I was done. I thanked her for telling me the truth, but I told her I wouldn't be part of their lives any longer. I wished her well, not because I owed her kindness, but because I needed to close this chapter with grace for my own peace. After that, I started looking ahead. I made a list, nothing fancy, just a simple note on my phone titled, "Things I'm Doing for Me." It had small things like, get a new job, travel somewhere alone, take a cooking class, go dancing with friends, start saving for my own apartment, fall back in love with me. It was the first list I'd made in a long time that wasn't about someone else. It was about reclaiming my life, step by step, day by day. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt hopeful. This wasn't the end of my story. This was my new beginning. The weeks that followed were strange, but they were mine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's shadow. There was no controlling boyfriend to check in with, no texts to respond to, no excuses to make. I was free. Free from the anxiety, free from the self-doubt, free from the idea that I had to keep bending myself into someone I wasn't just to keep someone else happy. It wasn't easy, of course. Letting go of him, of everything I thought we had, felt like pulling a weight off my chest. At first, it felt good, but then, little by little, I realized how much I had internalized. I had spent so long trying to earn his love, trying to be someone I wasn't, that I had forgotten how to be me. And there were moments where I felt lost, where I missed the comfort of his presence, even though I knew it was a lie. But those moments were brief. They didn't last long. Not anymore. I spent a lot of time with myself in those early days. I would go to parks and sit under the trees, just breathing in the fresh air. I took long walks, something I hadn't done in ages because he always wanted me to be doing something productive. I started reading again, diving into books that had always sparked something in me but had been pushed aside because his demands always came first. I picked up my old hobbies too. I found an art class in the evenings and signed up. I hadn't painted in years. I'd always loved it, but he never really supported my creative side. He was too wrapped up in his restaurant, too wrapped up in his own world. So, I'd buried my passion for painting, pushed it down, and tried to fill the void with him instead. But now? I was reclaiming that space. I was rediscovering who I was outside of him, outside of the relationship, outside of the mess. One night, a few weeks after everything had happened, I ran into an old friend from college. Her name was Emily, and we used to be close before I got tangled up in the mess of my relationship. We met for coffee, and it felt like we picked up right where we left off. She was shocked when I told her what had happened with my ex, but in the best way. She was understanding, empathetic, and didn't judge me. She listened to my story and told me she was proud of me for walking away. It was conversations like that, with people who genuinely cared, that made me realize something important. I wasn't alone in this. I hadn't been abandoned or cast aside. I had people who loved me, people who wanted me to thrive, to be happy. And so, I started to live for them, and for myself. I began setting little goals, ones I could achieve without the pressure of someone else's expectations hanging over me. I started looking for new job opportunities. I'd always loved the idea of working in marketing, so I applied for a few positions. The interviews were nerve-wracking, but every one was a chance for me to prove to myself that I was capable, that I had value outside of this failed relationship. Then came the real breakthrough. I booked a solo trip to the mountains. A weekend getaway, just for me. No friends, no ex-boyfriend, no distractions. I rented a tiny cabin, spent my days hiking through the trails, and my nights sitting by a crackling fire reading books, journaling, and reflecting. It was the first time in ages I felt truly at peace with myself. There, in the quiet of the mountains, I realized something profound. I didn't need someone else to complete me. I didn't need someone to make me feel valued or loved. I was enough on my own. I had always been enough. And that was the moment everything clicked? The healing wasn't about making him pay, or getting revenge, or trying to get back at him. It was about me reclaiming my power, my happiness, my sense of self. It was about realizing that the person I had been looking for all along was me. I came back from that trip with a new sense of purpose. My job application started getting responses, and I felt excited about what the future might hold. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew that I was moving in the right direction. It wasn't going to be perfect. Life rarely is. There would be hard days, doubts, moments when I missed what I thought I had. But now, I knew I had the strength to face them. I was finally free. And I was finally ready to live my life, my way. True healing and self-worth come from within. No matter how much you may invest in a relationship, your value should never depend on someone else's appreciation or love. Letting go of toxic relationships, reclaiming your independence, and rediscovering who you are is the first step toward a healthier, happier life. You are enough, and your happiness and peace should always come first.